In Kenya, the death of a politician rarely passes as a simple tragedy. In a political environment where power, land, and influence frequently collide, sudden deaths often attract suspicion.
I said myself, General Ogola was taken out.
For many observers, there is always the possibility of a hidden hand.
This is Johanna Ngeno, the former Member of Parliament for Emurua Dikir.
We are mourning. We cry. Our hero is dead.
To his supporters, Ngeno was more than a legislator. He was a confrontational defender of the communities he represented,
Why are you killing people?
often placing himself between the police and protesting residents during disputes over land. To them, he was a champion.
If I die, if you kill me.
And when such a figure dies suddenly, many people struggle to accept that it was simply an accident.
On the evening of February 28, 2026,
The town is quiet now that you're gone away. We're lost without your light to guide the way.
Johanna Ngeno died in a helicopter crash in Nandi County. Even before the news reached parts of his family,
ya kwamba mjumbe wa MK pale Kipsigis Johanna Ngeno ameaga dunia kwa ajali ya helikopta.
political reactions had already begun. Opposition figures immediately demanded a full international investigation. Some even called for the involvement of the FBI. Others went further, demanding that Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen step aside, suggesting that powerful interests could be involved.
Why would they say that?
When people suspect foul play in an aircraft crash involving a politician, they often refer to what they call a hidden hand. In practical terms, that phrase implies sabotage. The theory assumes that someone with a motive deliberately interfered with the aircraft. Such an operation would normally require individuals with technical knowledge, people familiar with aviation systems. The objective would not necessarily be to stop the aircraft from taking off. Instead, the sabotage would be subtle enough to allow the helicopter to depart normally, but severe enough to trigger failure during flight. But if that is the theory, the critical question becomes, when could such sabotage have happened?
Today, we reconstruct the movements of the helicopter involved. An Airbus H125, registration 5Y-DSB, operated by Corporate Helicopters Kenya Limited, a company associated with media businessman Samuel Kamau Macharia of Royal Media Services. To understand whether sabotage was even possible, we must examine every movement, every landing, every takeoff, and every moment the aircraft was accessible.
Before committing an assassination, perpetrators typically spend long periods studying their target. They track movements, routines, and vulnerabilities, waiting for the right opportunity. But in this case, did such an opportunity exist?
So guys,
According to individuals within Ngeno'S inner circle, the late MP was extremely unpredictable with his schedule. He often used multiple layers of planning. First, there was Schedule A, the version publicly released days in advance. Then Schedule B, a revised version circulated closer to the event. Finally, Schedule C, sometimes revealed only hours before the actual movement. This system made it extremely difficult for anyone to predict his final destination, and this strategy appeared clearly in the final days before his death. On February 26, 2026, the public schedule indicated that Ngeno would attend a Thanksgiving ceremony in Kajiado County, hosted by Justice and Constitutional Affairs Principal Secretary Judith Pareno, an event also expected to be attended by President William Ruto, But the following day, February 27th, that plan changed completely. Ngeno cancelled the Kajiado event and instead scheduled a trip to Ngeno'S in Trans Nzoia County, where he was expected to attend the 35th anniversary celebration of veteran musician Kim Kim. His original plan was to travel overnight to Nairobi and board a helicopter the following morning. But even that plan changed again. On the morning of February 28th, Ngeno made a last-minute decision. Instead of traveling to Nairobi first, he arranged for a helicopter to be hired directly from Corporate Helicopters Kenya Limited that very morning. Between 6:30 a.m. and 10:58 a.m., he held a closed-door meeting at his home with 4 unidentified individuals. During this period, even close associates were unable to reach him by phone.
Apparently hakuenda Nairobi lakini akaitisha ndege kwake nyumbani. So saa 2 asubuhi nampigia, saa 3 ashike, saa 4, saa 5, saa 6 na dakika 4 ndio akashika simu yangu, tukaongea for 30 seconds only.
Then the timeline moves to Wilson Airport. At 11:04 a.m., the Airbus H125 registration 5Y-DSB departed Wilson Airport, heading toward Emurua Dikir. And this is where the timeline begins to challenge the sabotage theory. The helicopter had been hired at the last minute. No one outside the operator could have known in advance which specific aircraft from the fleet would be assigned to the MP. For perpetrators planning a highly technical sabotage, such uncertainty creates a serious logistical problem. Sabotage normally requires preparation, access to the aircraft, time to interfere with systems, and confidence that the targeted aircraft will actually be used by the intended victim. In this case, the window between the final arrangement of the flight and the helicopter's departure was extremely narrow, which raises a critical question in our reconstruction. If sabotage occurred, when exactly could it have happened? At Wilson Airport, the timeline suggests there was little opportunity, and if the sabotage did not happen there, then investigators must look elsewhere in the helicopter's movements. Because in any investigation of a suspected mid-air failure, the most important question is always the same. Where was the aircraft, and who had access to it before the flight began?
After departing Wilson Airport at 11:04 a.m., the Airbus H125 registration 5Y-DSB began a series of short flights that would later become critical to investigators trying to reconstruct the final hours of the aircraft. Its first stop was Emurua Dikir, arriving at 11:55 a.m. at the home of Johanna Kipyegon Ngeno. The helicopter remained on the ground briefly. At 12:20 p.m., it lifted off again, meaning the aircraft had spent roughly 25 minutes at the MP's residence. The next destination was Mara Rianta. The aircraft landed there at 12:29 p.m. and departed at 12:54 p.m. During this stop, Ngeno briefly interacted with residents who were participating in rescue efforts for 2 men reportedly swept away by floods in the area. From Mara Rianta, the helicopter proceeded toward Ngeno'S in Trans Nzoia County, landing at 2:04 p.m. But the stop was extremely brief. Just 3 minutes later, at 2:07 p.m., the helicopter lifted off again. The aircraft then flew to Eldoret airstrip, arriving at 2:29 p.m. for refueling. Here the timeline becomes particularly interesting. The helicopter remained on the ground for approximately 36 minutes, departing again at 3:07 p.m. After leaving Eldoret, the aircraft briefly returned to Ngeno'S, landing at 3:41 p.m. and departing again 2 minutes later at 3:43 p.m. 37 minutes later, at 4:20 p.m., the helicopter arrived at Tabolwa. According to eyewitness accounts, something unusual had already begun to happen. Residents reported hearing an abnormal engine sound as the helicopter approached. The aircraft then made what appeared to be an unscheduled or precautionary landing. Local residents gathered around the helicopter, excited to see it. But according to reports, the occupants inside the aircraft may have mistaken the approaching crowd for a potential security threat. At 4:25 p.m., the helicopter took off again. However, witnesses say the aircraft struggled to gain altitude. The rotor system appeared to be straining, and the helicopter reportedly hovered for several seconds before finally climbing. Approximately 30 seconds later, it managed to gain height and continued flying. But something was clearly wrong. At 4:26 p.m., air traffic control reportedly lost communication with the aircraft. Then, at approximately 4:27 p.m., the helicopter once again began losing altitude. Moments later, the aircraft crashed in the Chepkeep area of Mossop constituency, striking trees before hitting the ground. The impact scattered debris and occupants across different points before the wreckage erupted into flames.
The crash had taken only 2 minutes, so the question returns. What exactly brought down the helicopter? Was this a case of deliberate sabotage, designed so that the failure would appear only during flight? Or was this the result of mechanical failure or environmental conditions? When we examine the timeline, several possible windows begin to appear. Could the sabotage have happened earlier at Wilson Airport, before the helicopter departed at 11:04 a.m.? Before any aircraft takes off, it must be prepared, inspected and cleared for flight. If someone intended to interfere with the helicopter, could that moment before departure have provided the opportunity? Or did the opportunity arise later, during the 25-minute stop at Ngeno'S home between 11:55 a.m. and 12:20 p.m.? Could it have occurred at Mara Rianta, where the aircraft remained on the ground for about 25 minutes while the MP briefly interacted with residents? Or was the most significant window the 36-minute stop at Eldoret airstrip, where the helicopter landed for refueling before continuing its journey? Each of these moments represents a period when the aircraft was stationary, moments when, at least in theory, someone could have gained access to the helicopter. And that is exactly what investigators must determine: whether any of these windows provided enough time and access for sabotage to occur. Each represents a moment when someone, in theory, could have gained access to the helicopter. But the timeline also presents another possibility. The stopovers and landings were extremely brief, so brief that it would have been difficult for any perpetrators to gain enough time to sabotage the helicopter. If that is the case, then the crash may not have been the result of sabotage at all. Instead, investigators must also consider another factor: the weather. Was the weather in Nandi County on February 28, 2026 severe enough to affect helicopter flight? Or was the problem already developing inside the aircraft itself? To answer that question, we must examine the weather conditions recorded on that evening. Because sometimes what appears to be a conspiracy is simply the unforgiving physics of flight. Whenever an aircraft crashes, investigators usually examine 3 primary possibilities: mechanical failure, human factors, or weather conditions. In this case, speculation about sabotage quickly dominated public debate. But another factor deserves careful examination: the weather over Nandi County on the evening of February 28, 2026. Weather archives from the region show relatively moderate temperatures throughout the 28th of February, generally ranging between 18 degrees Celsius and 25 degrees Celsius. Wind speeds during that period also remained fairly low, mostly fluctuating between 5 kilometers per hour and 12 kilometers per hour. For helicopter operations, such conditions are normally considered within safe operating limits. Strong winds, violent storms, or extreme atmospheric turbulence can destabilize helicopters. However, the meteorological data recorded on that day does not indicate unusually strong winds capable of forcing a modern helicopter out of the sky. However, one condition stands out: fog. Reports from the area indicate that by the late afternoon, dense fog had begun forming, reducing visibility to roughly 50 meters in some locations. For aviation, visibility is critical. Helicopter pilots flying under visual flight rules, VFR, must maintain clear visual reference with the ground and surrounding terrain. When visibility drops below safe thresholds, navigation becomes extremely challenging, particularly in regions with hills, trees, and uneven terrain like parts of Nandi County. But fog creates a specific kind of danger. It does not normally cause an aircraft engine to fail. Instead, fog primarily affects pilot perception and navigation. When visibility collapses, pilots may lose their visual horizon, misjudge altitude, or fail to see obstacles such as trees or rising terrain. This can lead to a phenomenon known in aviation as controlled flight into terrain, when a functioning aircraft unintentionally flies into the ground or obstacles because the pilot cannot see the environment clearly. But the eyewitness reports introduce another detail. Residents near Tabolwa reported hearing the helicopter producing an unusual sound, as if the engine was struggling before it made the emergency landing. This observation raises an important technical point. Weather conditions such as fog do not typically change the sound of an aircraft engine. Fog consists simply of tiny water droplets suspended in the air. While it can reduce visibility, it does not interfere with engine combustion in a way that would make the engine audibly struggle. If witnesses truly heard the engine straining, the more likely explanation would be a developing mechanical problem. And that brings the investigation back to the central question of this documentary. If the helicopter was already showing signs of mechanical trouble before it crashed, what exactly caused that failure? Was it a natural mechanical malfunction? Or could someone have deliberately interfered with the aircraft earlier in the day? As investigators continue to analyze the crash, another question is beginning to emerge. Records indicate that the helicopter involved in the accident, the Airbus H125 registration 5Y DSB, had last flown on February 22, 2026. After that flight, the aircraft reportedly remained idle for nearly 6 days, until February 28th, when it was assigned to carry Johanna Kipyegon Ngeno. Why did the helicopter remain grounded for that period? These are some of the questions we will continue to follow as more information begins to surface. For now, investigators have asked for patience, requesting approximately 30 days to complete their preliminary findings into what may have caused the Airbus H125 registration 5Y DSB to crash. As we await those answers, we will continue to examine the aircraft's history, its maintenance records, and every detail that may help explain what truly happened that evening. Until then, this investigation remains open. For now, allow me to say goodbye.
Lifelens TV. Beneath the surface, shadows creep, while hidden stories softly sleep. We'll follow where the evidence goes, through tangled paths that no one knows. With careful lens and patient eye, we find the truth that's veiled nearby, to bring the hidden to the light and make the future clear and bright. Lifelens TV.